So I'm a preacher. You guys know this. I collect stories all the time. There's one particular story that really helped me a lot as a young man. And I want to share it with you. But first, there's this old, I think it's an African proverb. It says, tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll grow. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. I think stories are, big word, but hermeneutics. They're lenses to look through. And life is lived forward, but it's understood backwards. And so when you hear a story, it can put on a filter on your eyes and kind of translate and help you translate at least your previous life and your past. And so this particular story helped me, especially if if any of you guys have ever felt overlooked, maybe underappreciated, maybe undercompensated, where you just feel like you have been left for dead in some senses or neglected. There are two types of trauma. The first would be abuse, and the second would be neglect. I'm really talking about neglect. Abuse is what's done to you. Neglect is something that's not done to you, or you didn't receive some certain things. So some people feel this sense of trauma because you didn't receive relational nutrients like love, affirmation, touch, appreciation, approval, where there's a lot of people out there that just feel like you're overlooked, you're underappreciated, people don't value you, or you're working hard but nobody sees it. You just don't feel like you're seen. It doesn't feel like your voice is validated. It doesn't feel like you're heard at all. I'm wondering if anybody's connecting with this right now, but I think there's a lot of people that feel very underappreciated and undervalued. So I'll tell you the story. So there's this young man. His name is Bo Eason. He's about 9 years old, and he has this Goliath-sized dream. He wants to play in the NFL. Now he's this young man, and he tries out for his first Pee Wee football team. Stud athlete, sharp, motivated, driven. Again, his goal is to one day be in the NFL. But his first coach he ever had said, give up on that dream. You're a good athlete, but give up on that dream because you're too small. And so Bo was devastated, comes back home, and he tells his dad the news. His dad tells him, Bo, listen to me. People will always have opinions about you. And young Bo said, well, Dad, I don't measure up. And the dad said this great line. Oh, I love this line so much. He goes, did they measure your heart? Oh my gosh, I can't wait to use that line with my son one day. Listen, people might say you're too small, you're undervalued, or you're overlooked, or you might have been the last person to get picked on the football team. Did they measure your heart? You can't measure heart. So Bo's dad starts telling this young man about a story of a ranch dog. So a ranch dog is known to do the work of about 10 men. These things are so valuable to a rancher. So a rancher would have a puppy. This dog would birth 10 puppies oftentimes. And then he would tie a yarn around the neck of the last dog, the runt of the litter, they would call it. And so this one was always the one that was the most underappreciated, undervalued. But ranchers know this is the most valuable dog in the whole litter. Here's why. Because ranch dogs would do the work of 10 men. And so he would sell off the other 9, and he would keep the last one. Again, the yarn would identify this is the runt of the litter. This is the one that everybody else overlooks. This is the one that everybody else undervalues, underappreciates. Oftentimes it's the smallest. It can be the weakest. But here's why, and here's the key identifier as to why a rancher gets this ranch dog. Is because they oftentimes have to work the hardest. They have to do tough stuff. They have to prove themselves. And they just get this grit on the inside of them. And so Bo Eason's dad is telling young Bo, he says, you're the runt of the litter. And don't take that as something that you are frustrated by. That's a blessing. It's because they cannot measure your heart. And so these ranch dogs would do, again, the work of 10 men. And ranchers would always identify, I see that. I don't know, to me, when I first heard that story, I like identify with that. We're up in Boston. We're in Boston, Massachusetts. Nobody comes up here to do a significant ministry. You rarely do you see mega churches. I don't really think there's many up here. You go everywhere else and people are known and seen and all that. And I'm not saying I need to be known and seen, but sometimes you can just feel forgotten. It's like, God, did you forget about me? Did Mom, Dad, do you guys see the work that I'm doing? And I don't know if anybody else relates to this, but I know for a season in my life, I certainly felt that way. Let me just tell you, as the runt of the litter, those are always the best leaders. The ones that are overlooked, the ones that feel underappreciated, the ones that had to work harder than everybody else, those are the best leaders always. And a rancher identifies this, and I think God identifies this. You know why? Because this is the story of King David. This is the story of Gideon, by the way. Gideon from the smallest tribe of Manasseh. He's like, God, me? I'm like literally I'm the least of these. I'm like, nobody wants me. And God says, you're my man. Matter of fact, you're a mighty warrior, Gideon. King David, his own father did not even recognize him. His own dad. And so the prophet comes to his father. He comes to Jesse. All of his sons are lined up. And so the prophet goes, one of your sons, Jesse, is going to be the next king of Israel. He brings up all of his sons, and he intentionally neglects David. This is David's story. He intentionally neglects David. And so the prophet goes through every single one and says, nope, this is not the king. This is not the king. This is not the king. 8 times, this is not the king. And he goes, Jesse, do you have any more sons? He goes, there's one of them. There's another one, but he's off with the shed. Like, he's obviously not your guy. And then the prophet goes, no, you need to bring him out here. He sees a young David, handsome, glowing, shining. And then God spoke to the prophet Samuel. He said, this is the king. Can you imagine how David felt in that moment? Some theologians and some scholars believe that David was horrible. He was a horrible father because of this moment right here. David and Absalom has a crazy story. We'll have to get into that in another time. But the reason David was an awesome king and a terrible dad was because he was likely neglected by his own father. And he saw King Saul as his spiritual father, even though his spiritual father neglected him and tried to kill him. But many scholars believe that David in this moment felt rejection because his own dad didn't even believe in him. I wonder if there's anybody else that are watching this video and you feel like your own family, God, people, friends, they don't believe in you. Let me just tell you, as the runt of the litter, as a young dog, as a young man or a young woman that has been overlooked, those are always the best leaders. I hope that story encouraged you. Sometimes I just want to share stories that really impacted me. If it impacted me, I think it'll impact you. And so I hope this video helped. Send this to a couple friends. You feel like maybe they're overlooked. They've been glanced past. Let me just tell you, this video would really help them. Send to a couple friends. Like and subscribe if this video add value to you. We're a young channel. It would mean the world to us if you would subscribe and check us out. Thank you.